Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Terry Tucker. As an author and professional speaker, he offers a unique perspective in his motivational messages. Terry has a diverse background in athletics, business, and law enforcement, including a role as a SWAT hostage negotiator. He is a master motivator who inspires audiences to live their best lives. His book, Sustainable Excellence 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, is a testament to his belief that we were born to win. Self-branded as a cancer warrior, Terry is also a contributor to the book Perspectives on Cancer, Stories of Hope, Healing, and Resilience. Terry Tucker, welcome to the show today.
Well, Stephen, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Hey, look, I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. But first, a reminder to our listeners and our viewers, follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. It helps us attract authors and speakers like Terry Tucker. Hey, Terry, I got to ask you right out of the gate, when you were starting your career as a student at the Citadel, did you see yourself doing the kinds of things that you're now doing?
Honestly, Stephen, I didn't, and I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but I went to the Citadel on a basketball scholarship. And you think you go to college, and your priority should be academics, athletics, military. I'm sorry, mine was just the opposite. I went there to play basketball, and I grew up. I became a man. I matured while I was there, and I am so grateful that I had that opportunity to do that. But no, I never in a million years thought I would be doing podcasts or speaking or writing books or doing anything like that. That was way beyond my dreams.
Yeah, it shows that we do evolve, we grow, we blossom, because sustainable excellence is a terrific book. We'll talk more about the book later on. Now, as I said in my intro of you, you have a real diverse background. I want to spend some time on it because I find it intriguing. First, you've already mentioned you were a basketball player at the Citadel and NCAA. I think were they Division One or Division Two?
Division One.
Citadel. Wow, that's big time basketball. For those individuals who happen to be out of the country, most Americans in the USA know about the NCAA. What is the NCAA?
It's the National Collegiate Athletic Association, and it's basically all the schools, all the colleges and universities that make up what they call these division 1, 2, and 3 tiers. Division 1 schools are usually the bigger type schools, not necessarily in terms of population, but they can give full scholarships, and many of their sports teams are on scholarship. Division 2 schools are more, they can give scholarships, they don't give as many. And then Division 3 schools don't give athletic scholarships. It's usually a need-based scholarship, or you get grants or something like that. And they're usually, they go from sort of biggest to smallest. Division 1 are your bigger schools. Division 3 are your smaller schools.
I get it. You must have been a pretty good high school player if you two have been picked up by the Citadel. What was playing in high school like for you?
So I grew up in Chicago, and it was great. I mean, Chicago, there were so many players. I mean, I played in the same conference with a player by the name of Isaiah Thomas, who would go on to Indiana University, win a national championship with Bobby Knight, and then go on to play for the Detroit Pistons and win a couple NBA championships, and is in the Hall of Fame. So I got an opportunity to really stretch in terms of my ability. I was lucky to play Division I basketball. I had 3 knee surgeries in high school, and the first 2 were pre-arthroscopic. So I have the large zipper scar on the outside of my knee. So just the opportunity to play beyond high school was something I was very fortunate to do, having had those 3 knee surgeries.
Yeah, I tell you what, you mentioned Chicago. Then, of course, the Citadel, for those who don't know it, is located in South Carolina. So, Terry, you went from the Windy City to the heat, hot suburbs in South Carolina. How was that transition for you?
hot, sweaty, yeah, when you're taking a shower and you're sweating, there's something wrong, I mean, that
Sure.
humidity, and then, the little bugs, the no-see-ums and stuff like that, that
Yeah.
we had to contend with, especially when we were doing parades and marching and things like that. I was 1,000 miles from home. I was originally, excuse me, going to play at the University of Toledo in Ohio,
Mhm.
and they offered me a scholarship. It was before the signing period that you were allowed to sign with the NCAA. I verbally said yes. And then 2 weeks later, they called and said, we're not sure if we have a scholarship for you. We'll let you know. And a week later, they called back and said we had a scholarship. And I was not an emotionally mature person at that time. And it was my dad who said, hey, let's think about this. This is a school that offered you something, you accepted, and then they took it back. And now they offered it again. And he asked me the sort of $1 million question: do you want to play for somebody that does that to you, that offers you something and then takes it back? And it was really my dad that was kind of getting me to think, did they have my best interest in mind? And
Yeah.
so I sat down with him and we kind of put a piece of paper together and drew a line down the middle and said, what were the pros and cons? And more cons came up than pros. And
Yeah.
so it was, what's next? And the
Mhm.
Citadel was my next choice. And, I mean, I think God works in mysterious ways. I think I was meant to go to the Citadel because Coach Robinson, Les Robinson, who I played for, was a tremendous individual and taught me a lot about life as well as basketball.
Yeah, you said a lot in that about leadership. We may come back to that, but you mentioned the name Les Robinson. Was he also the basketball coach who worked at North Carolina State University, or was this a different Les Robinson?
No, that's the same Les Robinson. He was a North
Uh-huh.
Carolina State graduate. He's the only person, as far as I know, that was the head basketball coach at 3 NCAA Division I schools, which was the Citadel, East Tennessee State, and North Carolina State, and also the athletic director at all three of those schools as well. So yeah, Les took over for Jim Valvano at North Carolina State at the end of his career when Valvano got in a little bit of trouble with recruiting and stuff like that, and Les took over for him.
Right. But you were more than just a jock at the Citadel. I think you got a business administration degree from there.
I did. And again, I'll go back to my father. I was a 17-year-old kid. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't really know what I wanted to major in. And it was my dad who said, major in business. And I was like, oh, okay, dad said major in business. So, I'll major in business. And I guess if I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't have majored in business. I really enjoyed law. That's one of the reasons I went into law enforcement. I would probably major in, political science or English or something like that, if I knew today what I knew back then. But I didn't, and I'm glad I got the degree because it helped me when I started a couple of my own businesses and things like that. But yeah, again, my dad kind of steered me or guided me to
Yeah.
really what got me to where I am today.
Yeah. People around the world like athletics. No matter where you are, you could be in a third world country or you could be in the most developed country like the United States. So, but many of us, Terry, we've seen athletes, college players, professional players, and we see them in these huddles. Most of us have no idea what happens in the huddle. What happens in the huddle?
Well, it depends on whether you're doing well or you're not doing well. Because if you're not doing well, there's a lot of four-letter words that go on around in those huddles. If you're doing well, it's more of a discussion on how you can continue to do well and things like that. So it really is sort of a reset, especially in basketball. Basketball tends to be a game of sort of ups and downs where, you'll have streaks. A team will go on, they've scored 20 points in a row or 15 points in a row. And you want to try to break that momentum, break that streak. So you'll take a timeout and you'll get everybody in the huddle just to kind of change the momentum of the game. So that's one philosophy of why you want to take a timeout and have a huddle. The other one is you're tired. we need a break here. So let's take a time out. Let's get together, get a drink of water, towel off, relax for a few minutes and talk about what we're doing right or wrong. So it really does depend on how the team's doing as to the attitude that the coach takes in that huddle.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned the word reset. Does it show up in life for you? That is, in the life journey, occasionally we may need to do a reset or even take a break. Does that show up in life for you as you work and talk to people?
It does. I mean, if you look at my resume, I have reset many times from, the business perspective to law enforcement to starting my own business to coaching high school basketball to dealing with cancer. And so there's, I think part of that is realizing that there's fear, there's anxiety, there's apprehension associated with that. But go ahead and do those things. You can. I love the quote from Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, who said, "I never lose. I either learn or I win." And I love that quote because, you start something, and we talked about my book. One of the chapters I put in my book was most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And Stephen, I know I've done that in my life. I know I've wanted to start something and you'd be like, oh, wait a minute, let's pull back for a minute. Maybe I don't have enough information. Maybe I'm not smart enough. What will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. And whenever I get an opportunity to speak, especially to younger people, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I was intrigued when I saw, you worked in law enforcement, but not just law enforcement. A couple of things stood out for me. An undercover narcotics investigator. What was that like?
Yeah, it's kind of funny when I mention that because I'm 6'8" tall, and people are like, yeah, really? That's what you did? And I did. And when I was doing that job, I never changed my appearance. I never grew my hair long. I never grew a beard or anything like that, because what motivates people in the illicit drug industry, and it is an industry, I'll tell you that right now, is greed. And so as long as you have money, you can find somebody that will sell you illicit drugs. And so I did do that. I would buy drugs on the street and we would do what was called buy busts. But what I like to do is we would get complaints from citizens and they would say, they're selling out of this house or this apartment or something like that. And I would sit on those. I would do surveillance. I would watch to see if that was occurring. If I thought it was, I would have a uniformed car pull somebody over that I thought had just bought. And I would talk my way into the car, get the drugs, and then see if they wanted to work off their case and then do a search warrant and have the SWAT team hit the door and shut them down that way. And the benefit of doing that was it was a show of force. It was letting the neighbors and the people that were involved in that know that, hey, we're here. You may not see us, but we're here and we want to keep your community safe and secure for you. I mean, it was, as police officers, you work for the citizens. You work for the single mom that's working 2 jobs to try to get their kids through school and the grandmother that's raising, her grandkids. And those are the people you work for. Those are the people you try to make a difference in their lives and things like that. So I love doing it. It was a lot of fun. It was dangerous. I got shot at a couple times and stuff, but it was something that I really enjoyed doing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, can you think of one terrifying moment where you worked as a narc agent?
Yeah, I was with a partner, and we just pulled up in this area that was just known to sell dope. There were a lot of people hanging out, and I worked the night shift, so this was probably 2:00 in the morning. And a guy comes up to the car, what do you need? And he shows us the dope, and my partner, the guy was fast as lightning. He jumps out, and the guy takes off. We start chasing him. And literally from across the street, literally, if you think of a residential street, a guy took a couple shots at us, and fortunately missed us. But I mean, it sounded like a cannon went off, during those shots. And we both hit the deck, and we ended up catching the guy who tried to sell us dope. And we chased the guy who shot at us, but he jumped into a car and got away. So, I mean, that was certainly scary. But the other part of it was you almost had to be an actor. I remember one time I came into work, and my former partner who I'd ridden when we were in uniform, she was working the day shift in the drug unit. And she called me and she said, I need you to buy some drugs, some actually psilocybin, which is mushrooms, from these kids in Dayton that were coming down to Cincinnati, wanted to get money so that they could party at the bars. And I said, okay, I'll buy, but what's the backstory? I mean, they don't know me from Adam. And it's like, well, and it's so funny, Stephen. I posed, and you're going to love this. I posed as a professor of metallurgy from the University of Cincinnati. I didn't know anything about metal other than you put metal out in the rain and it rusts. That was my extent of knowledge on metallurgy. But I met them in a park, and I kind of had a briefcase and all that stuff, and they jumped in and kind of looked around, and they seemed safe, showed me the mushrooms. I gave them $200, and unfortunately, instead of partying in Cincinnati at the bars, they were guests of the Hamilton County Justice Center that evening. So, yeah.
Party pooper.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was.
Yeah. Well, SWAT. I mean, but I'm gonna leave that alone for now. But I find it intriguing as well. We talk again. Maybe I'll ask you about being a SWAT hostage negotiator. Now, speaker and writer. I want to spend a little time about this because I know that one of the things that's your passion is to talk about motivation, to motivate individuals. And I'm curious, why is that? Why did that show up for you as a place where you serve people?
Because I think it's that motivation is something that comes or needs to come from you. I can't motivate you. You've got to do that for yourself. And motivation is important, but I think it's not enough. I kind of expand on that and go into not only do you need motivation, but you need discipline and you need good habits. And if you think of those three sort of as a three-legged stool, if any one of those is absent or is not as profound as the other ones, it's going to be like that stool, one of those legs is shorter than the other, and it's going to be wobbly and you're going to be off balance. So if you're highly motivated, but you're not disciplined and you don't have good habits, very hard to be successful. If you're not motivated, but you have discipline and great habits, again, very hard to be successful. And if you're disciplined and highly motivated, but you have terrible habits, again, highly unlikely you will be successful in whatever you do. So I just think I try to motivate people by just exhibiting what motivation looks like. Look, this is an example of a motivated individual. Like I say, I can't make you be motivated. That's something that's got to come from you. But I think motivation along with discipline and good habits really is almost the key to being successful in life.
Have you always been a motivated individual, Terry?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, when I was 13 years old, I was 6'5". I had a size 14 shoe, and my ears looked like Dumbo out of the Disney movie. I mean, my body had not caught up, with my ears and things. And I got teased mercilessly about that, and so I put that ugliness, I guess, into practicing basketball, into something that was positive. And basketball was a great sport because it's not like baseball or football where you need somebody else to play with you. You can practice basketball on your own. You just need a ball and a hoop. And so I spent a lot of time practicing basketball. And the more I practiced, the better I got at it. And the more I got, or the better I got at it, the more motivated I wanted to get out there and do it and practice and things like that. So it was sort of like having a little snowball and rolling it downhill. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was lucky enough, as I said, to eventually play in college. And I think that really, because I spent so much time when I was younger developing those fundamentals.
Now, we're going to talk about your book in a moment, but the subtitle of your book, Sustainable Excellence, it says 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and extraordinary life. And in another place you said, Terry, this is what I want to get to, that leading an extraordinary life is our birthright. What do you mean by that?
I mean, we were all born to be exceptional. We were all born to be great. We were all born for a purpose in this life. I love the quote from Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning and was a Holocaust survivor in this concentration camps during World War II. And I'm not going to try to quote it verbatim because I'll mess it up. But basically what Frankl said is life should not be lived in the abstract. We all have a purpose. We all have a reason that we were put on the face of this earth. And we almost have a moral obligation to find that reason and to live it. So I think that's just incredibly important when you look at your life. And I think so many people kind of just muddle through their life. There's an entrepreneur by the name of Ed Mylett, and he talks about the 4 types of people in the world. And he says the first type are the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people you will encounter in your life. The second group he talks about are the motivated. He said it's kind of a carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. It's kind of low level, but it works for a lot of people to have a great life. And then the third type of person he talks about are the inspirational people. Inspiration coming from 2 words, in spirit. So if you're an inspirational person, you move people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And sometimes if I'm speaking, depending on the audience and what's going on, I'll tell that story and then I'll be like, all right, show of hands, how many people are unmotivated? And nobody raises their hand. Nobody feels that they are unmotivated in life. But if you believe Mylett, most people are. Most people don't want to know or don't look for their purpose in life, use their unique gifts and talents, and then try to live that purpose.
You've mentioned purpose a few times. I got to ask you, I mean, because people will say, okay, Terry Tucker, I believe that's important, but how do I discover my purpose?
I think it's relatively easy, but part of it is going to take some work. You have to understand what your gifts and talents are. I mean, Stephen, if you told me to go be an accountant, I would probably fail miserably. That's not where my gifts and talents lie. So understand what your gifts and talents are, and then figure out things that interest you. I heard an individual by the name of Jeff Wetzler, and he talked about looking at life differently than I think I've ever looked at it, and differently than I think we all look at it. We kind of, okay, this year my goals are A, B, and C. And he says, look at your life in terms of decades. And he says, in your 20s, do everything. Everything that you find interesting, everything you find that you might enjoy, you're not sure, but he says, jump into everything, make mistakes, just do everything. And then he says, in your 30s, pick 2 or 3 things and dig in to those things. And then in your 40s, find that one thing that's in your heart, that's in your soul, and do that. And he said, then in your 50s and 60s and beyond, you can reap the rewards that you sowed in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I don't know if you feel this way, if you've talked to people that have experienced this, Stephen, but I see a lot of younger people, say you're in you're 28, you're 29, you're 30, and you're like, oh, I'm not where I should be in my career or where I want to be in my career. I'm not making the money I want to make. I don't have the relationships I have. And people they get upset. They get down. They feel like their life doesn't have meaning. And I think when you look at your life in those small little abstracts, yeah, it can get overwhelming and you're not where you are. But if you look at your life more in decades, well, in the 20s, I'm going to do all this stuff. I'm going to do everything, whether it's something I enjoy, whether it's pleasurable, whether it's for fun, whether it's for work, whether it's for my spirit. And then I'm going to really dig in my 30s to some things that I like. If you look at life differently like that, I don't think there's the stress. There's the worry that I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in this decade.
Yeah, Terry, that's a great roadmap for someone who is, 16, 18, But assuming that life goes, is it linear? Life, you're committed to excellence. But there's some people who say, Terry Tucker, my life has been like this, and then you tell me to be committed to excellence. What happens to those individuals? How do they get themselves going if they've had
Yeah.
starts and stops and starts and stops in life, but yet they want to be excellent?
And you're absolutely right. I mean, life isn't linear. That's one thing I learned from basketball. You could work real hard and then you would get to a point and you would plateau. It's like, okay, I don't think I'm getting any better. And then maybe you keep working harder and you get worse. So you go up, you go plateau, you go down. Okay, but I keep working hard. And then I go up again. And life is exactly like that. I mean, sports, I think, is a microcosm for life. Life is exactly like that. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have good and bad. And what I always try to say is this: we tend to look at our lives, so we remember the good things. So we graduate, we get promoted, we get married. And then we look at the bad things. We lose our job, somebody close to us dies, we have a bankruptcy or something like that. And that's how we gauge our lives, the ups and the downs. That's how we remember them. But life is one in the middle. Life is one in the day in, day out. How do you treat yourself? How do you motivate yourself? How do you get up every day and present your best self? So life isn't, the ups, the peaks and the valleys. Life is in the middle. And that's where you become successful in your life. And so I would say, find your purpose. And let me say this: we tend to think of purpose and we talk about it in the singular, like it's one thing. And Stephen, for me, and I'm not going to project this on anybody, but I think this is true of everybody. I think for me, it's been purposes, plural. Mm-hmm. That when I was younger, I was an athlete. I ate, drank, and slept basketball. It's what I was supposed to do. And then as I became an adult, I felt my purpose was really to be in law enforcement, to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. And now, it's, in all honesty, I'm probably coming to the end of my life with my cancer battle. My purpose has changed again to being somebody who puts as much goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world. So understand that it would be great if your purpose or purposes could align with your job or your occupation, but they don't have to. Your job could be over here. It's what you do to pay the bills, but your purpose is over here, to be a podcast host, to be an activist, to be a writer, to be a painter, whatever it is you feel you're supposed to do. So I think a lot of times we tend to look at purpose too narrowly, and that we need to look at it bigger, because as we grow and get older in life, I think our purpose changes.
Mm-hmm. I want to dig deeper because I hear a lot of professional development in what you're sharing, which could be good for everyone. But I want to get deeper because you admit, in your writings and your speaking, that we should never be surprised by adversity. Can you say a little bit more about? I think you might have said, I may have the phrase, adversity is a given, and I took that to mean expected. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I feel about my cancer journey, two things that I am 100% sure that I've learned during this journey is, number one, I don't think you really know yourself until you have been tested by some form of adversity in your life, whether it's cancer, whether it's me fighting back from knee surgery, whatever it is in your life, a spouse dies, a parent dies, you're going to have adversity in your life. Can you use that adversity to make you better and stronger? And the second thing that I've learned through my cancer journey, and I know this is going to sound foreign to some of your audience, is that cancer has made me a better human being. I would not trade my cancer journey for anything in the world. And I've been incredibly sick. I was given a death sentence 12 years ago. I've had my foot amputated. I've had my leg amputated. I've had all these things go on. But at the same time, it's made me better. And I always say, most of my life I'd spent doing physical things, whether it was athletics, whether it was police work, SWAT team, things like that. And now I don't have a left leg and I'm in a wheelchair. So how do you balance those in your life? And I think when you can't do what you're good at, you do what's important. And you figure that out in life. What's really important? It's not money, it's not power, it's not influence. And Stephen, I'll end with this. I've seen so many people in my life that feel that they're born empty, and that when they get out of school and they get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that their job is then to fill their empty self up. I've got to get the best education and make the most money and drive the nicest car, live in the nicest house, and have the latest gadgets and gizmos. And what I found is it's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full with whatever we need to be successful in life, however you define that term, already inside us. We just need to pull it out and use it for our benefit. So our job in life should not be to fill ourselves up. Our job in life should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our families, of our friends, of our communities, and of our country. And when you make that paradigm shift to, it's not about what I can get, it's about what I can give, it's amazing how much more happy, how much more fulfilled you will feel in your life.
Yeah. And look, I just got to probe this a little more because, you don't talk about just adversity like one side of the coin. You also say there's resilience. But I want to probe a little more, ask you to talk with us about resilience and your cancer, not only diagnosis, your cancer, surviving it, resilience in terms of your amputation. What have you learned about resilience? In fact, Terry, hold on. Let's roll back for just a minute. Take us back to when you got the diagnosis, you have cancer.
So in 2012, I was a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas. I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe. And initially, I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. He takes an x-ray and he says, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he does. And he shows it to me. It's just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, Stephen, I get the call from him. And as I mentioned, he's a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he's having explaining to me what's going on, the more frightened I am becoming. Until finally, he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And because my cancer was so uncommon, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. And I did. And they told me after they took the tumor out of my foot and all the lymph nodes in my groin, you're going to be dead in 2 years. We have nothing to offer you. If it's somewhere we can cut it out, surgery is an option. Other than that, we have Zippo for you. We have nothing that we can offer you. And I thought, well, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 12 years.
Boy, talking about resilience, that's amazing. That is amazing. And that also feeds right into mindset. Have you always had this mindset that you just shared with us? Or is this something that you've cultivated over the years?
I think as I've gotten older, especially when I was back in high school, when I had my knee surgeries, my second knee surgery, they took out 25 pieces of my bone, put me in a cast from my hip to my ankle for the entire summer and told me I'd never play basketball again. And I'm like, okay, doc, you don't know me. You don't know how hard I'm willing to work to get back. So I started to cultivate that mindset back then. I've certainly developed it more through my cancer journey. And I mean, when I was first diagnosed, I don't want your audience to think that I'm some superhuman. You're looking at me right now. There's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape.
Well, I think there's one.
Yeah, I don't have a cape and fly around magical powers. But what I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief. When I was diagnosed, first it was, denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And then I got angry. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And our daughter was in high school at the time I was diagnosed. So there was a bargaining with God. hey, just let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then I absolutely got down. I mean, I got depressed. And then I just got to a point where I don't like the cards that I've been dealt here, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And again, that's what I've been trying to do for the last 12 years.
You're doing a good job at it because out of all of this, you still talk about things like the behaviors of high achievers. Can you give us two or three of those behaviors of high achievers?
Yeah, I think number one, high achievers realize they're afraid. Everybody's scared. Everybody is afraid. And fear stops people from doing things. And I love to tell a story about Jesse Itzler. He was an owner of the Atlanta Hawks in the National Basketball Association. And he's married to a woman by the name of Sarah Blakely. And Sarah Blakely founded a woman's undergarment company called Spanx. It's a multi-million-dollar company. And he tells the story that when she started that company, she had one prototype and $5,000. She had been a door-to-door, and your audience is going to laugh at this because we don't even use these anymore, fax salesperson. So we don't even use faxes anymore. And the point of his story is she was afraid. I mean, should I start this company now? I know about sales. I don't know about marketing. I don't know about human resources. I don't know about distribution. And his point is, wherever you are in life, start. Just start. Jump in and figure it out as you go. Because as you will learn as you get older, and Stephen, you and I think probably have learned this, it's not the destination. It's the journey to get to that destination that I think really, that's life. That's what life is about. It's not getting to the top of the mountain. It's the journey to get to the top of the mountain. So I would say fear is one thing that people have to deal with. The other thing is you can't worry about what other people say. You can't worry about what other people think. The more people try to discourage you, I would tell you that you're probably on the right path because people don't want you to be successful. They want to be successful. So they'll do everything they can to put you down, to get you to a point where, oh, yeah, maybe they're right. So I'll quit. I'll stop. I'll give up. And the third thing I'll say is the road to success, the road to being a high achiever is paved with failure. You're going to have to fail, and you're going to have to fail a lot, not for the sake of failing, but for the sake of what you're going to learn during that failure. You're not a loser if you lose on the scoreboard. You're only a loser if you don't learn from the experience that you had. So I would give you those three things as something that high achievers deal with to get to be high achievers.
Very good. Those are good pointers for sure. Now, earlier in our conversation, you touched on some leadership, leadership, what should I call it? Some leadership styles. You were talking about your father. I want to probe this a little bit more because a lot of people talk about leaders. A lot of people ask the question, are leaders born or are they made? Well, let me ask you that question. Are leaders born or are they made?
Yeah, it's kind of the, nature or nurture kind of thing. I think leaders are made, to be honest with you. I think anybody could be a leader. I remember hearing a statistic that said that 163 of the Fortune 500 companies are run by members who used to be United States Marines. Now, that told me the Marines must be doing something. And so I went and read a book called Trust-Based Leadership, which is basically how the United States Marine Corps trains its soldiers, trains the men and women who are in their service. And I think the interesting thing about that service is that there's sort of this idea that once a Marine, always a Marine. So even if you're not active duty or reserve in the Marine Corps, you're 30 years out, you're still a Marine. You're still expected to go with those values, to go with those traits. And being a leader is really understanding what the mission is, communicating that mission to the people who will carry it out, allowing them to develop how they're going to get that mission accomplished, and being the resource that helps them. What do you need? How can I help you? And the Marines always talk about, leaders always eat last. Make sure everybody else gets their food, then you eat last. Those are just, I think, things that are incredibly important. And I love looking at the Marine Corps because they seem to be, and they're the only branch of the service currently that always meets their quota in terms of recruits every year. They must be doing something right.
Yeah. Look, and you've already touched on this, but I want to probe a little deeper. I want to package this around empower. How do you empower a team? You already gave us some clues because, my question really is, how do you do that? How do you empower? Because a leader can't do it alone, which is what you just told us. And tell us a little more about empowering the rest of the team.
Yeah, I'll give you a story because I've seen this in my life, and you probably have as well. You're sitting around a conference table. There's some problem within the organization, and what happens? Okay, the boss, the leader, comes in, sits down, and says, "Okay, here's the problem that we're experiencing." Now, this can go one of two ways, and the first way is the wrong way. And then the leader says, "Well, here's what I think we should do to solve it. We should do X, Y, and Z." But I want to go around the table and I want to hear what other people say. Now, what idiot is going to say something contrary to what the boss just said? Nobody's going to say that. So they're all going to say or parrot something that the boss just said, and then they're going to go away, and the problem isn't going to get solved. The better way to handle this, and the way I've seen it work better, is the boss comes in, boss sits down, boss says, "Here's the problem. How do you all think we can fix it?" And then shuts up. Be quiet and let the people that are on the front line, let the people that are closest to the customer or that are making the product or whatever say, "You know what? We're not doing this right." And a leader should always ask, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And what should we do differently? As a leader, if you ask those three questions, you're never going to go wrong. Let me rephrase that. As long as you have an environment where you're allowing the people who you ask those questions to feel that it's safe. Like, hey, I can tell the boss that, you know what, we're doing this, and these people over here are doing the exact same thing. We're duplicating our work. Why are we doing that? We could do this more efficiently that way. Well, maybe the boss doesn't know that, but if you're saying that to them and they feel that you are a person of character, of integrity, that they're not going to get in trouble because they said that, they're willing to open up to you. So I would say the people that are closest to the problem, get them involved in solving the problem, and don't think because you're the manager or the director or the vice president or the president that you know how to handle it. Get the people who are closest to the problem involved.
Yeah, but what I hear you say is that, of course, you can empower your team, but first, that person at the top has to really be a leader and exhibit the characteristics of leadership. And I think you just gave us some clues on that a moment ago. Terry, I've heard a lot of buzzwords around, and you've mentioned this in your book, servant leadership. But people I've been hearing this for decades. I think I might have even used it. Servant leader, servant leader. Terry, what is a servant leader? How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I was taught that at the Citadel, when I was back in college 40 years ago, that servant leadership, you serve. A leader, there's a saying that says, as the leader goes, so the organization goes always, 100% of the time. So if you're one of these people that thinks it's all about you, I can promise you that's the way your organization is going to go. If you and my dad used to always tell me, you win with people. I as a basketball player, we won as a team. I mean, if I went out there by myself, I get killed. It's 1-on-5. Even sports like golf and tennis, where you're an individual, there's all the support staff behind. There's the trainers, there's the coaches, there's the people who gave you a massage, to release that tension in your neck. And all those people help you get to where you are. So understand that you can't do this in a vacuum. And a servant leader is somebody who does that. Here's the mission. Here's what needs to be accomplished. I am here to serve you to get that mission accomplished. And one of the biggest things you got to do is put your ego aside. Somebody may say something to you that is critical of the way you're managing or handling a project or a situation. And what do we usually do? We go off on those people. We kind of ostracize them. We move them out of our sphere of influence. No, those are the people you need. You need those people as a friend. You need those people as a leader to tell you the truth. If somebody cares about you, loves you enough to tell you the truth, put those people in your life. I want people to tell me, "Hey, Terry, yeah, I wouldn't do that. That's not a good situation for you. I wouldn't." Those people love me enough to sacrifice the relationship to make sure that I am the best person that I can be.
Yeah. What I like about what you write about in your book is that You saw all of these things about, the role of the leader, empower the team, servant leadership, but you also admit that sometimes there's a rotten apple in the barrel. So I think you used the phrase toxic individuals. How do you handle them? Look, I should have had your book 10 years ago when I was in leadership. How do you handle toxic individuals?
Well, I mean, and we had those people in law enforcement. We had people that you should never have been a cop. You should never have gotten through the screening process and gone through the academy because you don't have the right mindset. You don't have the right frame of mind to do this job. This is a service occupation. And if you're out there to kick butt and take names, yeah, you're going to run across somebody who's bigger, stronger, and tougher than you. You're going to get hurt, and you're probably going to get one of us hurt as well. So I guess I would, understand that there are those toxic people in the world. Now, what do most organizations do? They either ostracize them, they put them somewhere where they can't hurt anybody. It's like, okay, you go in the back room and you count widgets. That's what you're going to do. But if you're honest, you should, one, coach that person, try to help that person. Maybe they don't see what their issue are, or maybe there's a reason for why they are the way they are that you don't know about. So I would try that. But if that doesn't work, you need to get those people out of your organization. One toxic individual, I mean, it would just be like having a rotten apple in a barrel. If that apple continues to fester and decay, it's going to cause the rest of them to fester and decay as well. You have to get those people out of your life. And I know in a business, it's easier to do. Where that's hard to do is when they're in your own family. And people they're toxic. It's like, hey, Terry, you need to go do this. Well, I really don't want to do that. I want to go over here and do this. No, you need to do that. And they don't care what you want. They feel they have power over you because they're your uncle or they're your cousin, your older cousin, or there's something like that. And they're telling you what to do. And that is very hard to deal with because they're blood, they're family. And it's hard to say no to family. It's hard to say no to my dad. No, I don't want to major in business. I did it because I knew he loved me. I knew he had my best interest in mind. But in hindsight, it wasn't something that I really wanted to do. But I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. I tell you, you hit all of the right points regarding leadership. And, after all of these things, oh, by the way, I love it from what you just said. If you can save a team member, save a team member. I really love that. But if you can't, sometimes you got to let them go.
Right.
And I think that's what you've said. Yeah. But look, you also closed the circle and you said, look, you need to develop, I hope I have this right, a culture of accountability. Once you've done all of these things with the team, you've given them opportunities, you need to develop a culture of accountability. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, you need to say, look, I'm going to take all your input, but at the end of the day, I'm still the one that has to make the decision. And at the end of the day, I may not do what you suggest or what you want me to do. And I get that. And I'm accountable to you for that because I asked you for your input and I chose not to do that. I had the great pleasure, the great honor of working with a woman by the name of Nancy Schlichting, who eventually became the president and CEO of the Henry Ford Health Systems in Michigan. And Nancy, when I worked with her when we were in Columbus, Ohio, she was great about telling people, like people would say, they'd have a round table, everybody come in, tell us your thoughts, tell us your opinions, tell us what you think. And again, that's getting to the people that are on the front line. Tell us what we should do differently or what we're doing wrong or what we can do better. And Nancy was great. I tried to emulate her style. She was great about being able to tell people no. And I think people appreciate that. Stephen, if you asked me a question and I was the CEO and I said, oh, yeah, sure, Stephen, sounds like a good idea. Yeah, we'll put a task force together and we'll study that. And what happens? They study it to death and nothing happens. Nothing happens at all. And as a human, as an individual, you would probably feel better if I just said to you, I understand, I hear what you're saying, Stephen, but we're not going to do that. And the great thing about Nancy is, and she would tell you why. She would say, and here's why. because of X, Y, and Z, or A, B, and C. She wouldn't just let you hang there. She would give you a reasonable explanation. And she was one of these people, so many people think you've got to hold information close to the vest. Don't share information with them. No, share as much information as you possibly can with your staff. It gets them involved. It gets them engaged in what's going on. Now, there are certain things that maybe you can share. Maybe you're looking at a merger or, a sell or an acquisition or something like that you can't tell right now. But if you've got information that other people would benefit from, stop the rumor mill right now and get it out there. Let people know what's going on.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. Now, you've written one book and you've contributed to another book. I want to spend a little bit of time. We've already touched on them, but I want to spend a little bit of time with them. The first one, the book that you've written, I just love the primary title, Sustainable Excellence. Well, look, we've talked about excellence. Big question, Terry, is it sustainable? And do you show us how to do it in your book?
I like to think I do. In the book, we talk about excellence, and a lot of times I'll get, what is excellence? And my response to that is always, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You wrote the book. It's got a title. So how do you not know? And the reason I say I don't know is because, Stephen, you and I may look at, a play, a sports team, a doctor, and, I may say, man, I think that person or that team is excellent. And you may say, I think they're good, but I don't think they're excellent. And the reason I don't want to define excellence is because I think excellence is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. You've got to determine what excellence is for you. So once you've done that, then how do you sustain it? And I think the way you do that, and what do people do? They work really hard, they get to the top of the mountain, and then what do? They put their feet up on the desk, pour themselves a drink, kind of kick back and say, I've arrived. And then what happens? 6 months, a year from now, boom, somebody passes them up. And you're like, whoa, what happened there? How did those people do that? Well, people are watching you. They're learning from you. They're studying how you did what you did, and they're building a better mousetrap. They're figuring out how they can go above. So you constantly, if you want to sustain excellence, you constantly have to innovate. You constantly have to practice. You constantly have to find new markets or new ways to deliver your product. And if you're willing to do that, there's a very good chance you can continue to sustain excellence. But people work so hard to get to the top of the mountain that when they get there, they just, okay, let's take a breath, let's relax. And then somebody passes them up. You got to love the work. You've got to love the grind, even the ugliness. I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved being a police officer. I hated standing on a traffic post for 12 hours in the middle of the summer with all my gear on. It was terrible, but I still love being a cop. No perfect person, no perfect job, no perfect relationship, no perfect company. Understand that. You're always going to have those ups and downs, but realize what's important, focus on that.
Yeah. Well, Terry, you reminded me of, and I want you to comment on this. Back in the day, you'll remember Blockbuster, the big time video store.
Yes.
Back in the day. And then I think Redbox came around. And today, nobody even talks about Blockbuster. Is that the kind of thing? Is that they had dominated the market. And suddenly Netflix, Redbox, wow, is that what you're talking about? You can't just sit around on your successes.
Well, but that was a conscious decision. I mean, that was, I think, goes more back to what you were talking about earlier about accountability. Okay, I see this. I see the climate of what's going on and how people are getting their movies, their entertainment, and things like that. Do I think that's just a fad, or do I think that's a long-term thing that's going to happen? And Blockbuster, there's one Blockbuster store, I think, in the state of Washington still in existence, but the rest of them went by the wayside because the CEO said, yeah, I think this is kind of a flash in the pan. I don't think this is going to be a long-term. And he was wrong. And you're right. And Blockbuster is now out of business, and Netflix and all these other services are how people get their entertainment. Blockbuster could have been part of that. They just thought it was a flash in the pan and wasn't going to be long-term. And so it cost them their entire business.
Yeah, we don't know this to be true, but perhaps the CEO should have listened to someone in the room.
Yeah.
At least Terry empowers somebody in the room, right? To speak up. Yeah, but look, 10 principles, you've already talked about some of them. If you were to pick your favorite, your number one principle in your book, what would that be? And tell us why.
Well, the one I talk about is the one I've already told you about most people think with their fears and their insecurities. The other one that I'll say is the last principle, and it's the importance of love. And I'm not talking about romantic love. And I remember when I was growing up, there was a basketball coach at UCLA by the name of John Wooden, and I loved Coach Wooden. I mean, he was an incredible leader, an incredible coach. And I remember I used to listen and read everything that he did. And one day he was being interviewed by a sports reporter, and I was sitting watching the television. I had a notebook and a pencil, and I'm like, all right, come on, coach, give me some good X's and O's that I can use for my ability in basketball so I can get better. And the reporter asked him a question that was similar to, what's the most important thing you teach, or what's the most important thing you want your players to learn? And he said, I want my players to understand the importance of love. And as a 13-year-old kid, I was like, no, that's not what I want. I want X's and O's. I want something good, coach. No. But what he was trying to say, and which I didn't understand because I wasn't old enough or mature enough to understand that, was the importance of love in our life. To love what we do, to love ourselves, to love the people that are in our lives. All that is really what life comes down to. It's not how much money you make. The universe could care less how much money you make, what your title is, what kind of car you drive. Does not care. What the universe cares about is the relationships, the connections that we have in our lives. And one of the nurses that currently takes care of me when I go for my treatment for my tumors used to be a hospice nurse. And for those of your audience who don't know about hospice, it's people who take care of others at the end of their life, end of life care. And she recommended a book to me. And the book was called Imagine Heaven. And it's a book about people who have near-death experiences. So they die, and then medical science brings them back, comes back. And one of the most interesting things that I found in that book was, no matter who the person died saw, whether it was God, a saint, an angel, a friend, a relative, whoever it was, almost every single one of them was asked this question: how do you treat my people? In other words, how do we treat each other? I go back to the Bible when Jesus was asked, what's the most important commandment? Have no other gods but me, love God above everything else. And the second is just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. What the universe cares about is the relationships we have with each other. And I think we were talking about COVID, if COVID taught us anything, it's how much we need each other. When we were separated, when we were quarantined, when we couldn't get together, alcoholism rates went up. Divorce rates went up, drug abuse rates went up, domestic violence rates went up. We are better together. So if I'm going to be remembered for anything in my life, and I'm not, I want it to be the relationships, the connections that I have with other people.
Yeah, I mean, I like that a lot, Terry. I like that a lot for sure. Yeah, and then you contributed to the book, Perspectives on Cancer, Stories of Healing, Hope, and Resilience. Why did you say yes when you got that invitation to contribute an article, your story, to this book?
I mean, the individual who had asked me, I had been, excuse me, a guest on his podcast, and I like what he's trying to do. I like how he's trying to promote cancer, not so much as a scary disease that's going to kill you. And I think that's one thing I've learned just in my experience. Cancer is rapidly evolving to not a death sentence, but more of a chronic disease that we can live with, kind of like diabetes and things like that. We're getting to that point. We're not there 100% yet, but I liked what he's trying to do. I like how he's trying to bring information forward to help people who are going through cancer, or who are taking care of people who have cancer, or who are clinicians that are dealing with people who have cancer. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to just tell my story. Here's my story. Maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't, but I'm putting it out there in the hopes that maybe it can make a difference in somebody's life.
How long did it take you to get to a point where you can be transparent about your cancer journey?
It really started when I started to do podcasts. I'm a person who doesn't like to talk about myself. I don't want to tell you about my disease or my illness or what I've done in the past. I keep things very close to the vest. And when I started to do podcasting, and I started a speaking business just as COVID hit. And this is the honest truth, Stephen. Somebody reached out to me and said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I said, sure. What's a podcast? I had no idea what a podcast was. And he explained it to me. And I said, okay, I'll try it. And Stephen, I was terrible. I was horrible at my first podcast. I had Post-it notes all around the camera. And he would ask me a question and I would lean in and I would read the Post-it note. I was terrible. I provided no value to the audience. But then I stepped back and I was like, well, I wasn't any good when I first started to learn how to drive or when I cooked my first meal. I think I burned the water. And, when I studied algebra, wasn't very good at it. So I had to get better. I had to be willing to practice. And part of being a good guest or having a good podcast as a host, as is being authentic, is being vulnerable, of saying, this is who I am, warts and all. You know what? I don't have it all figured out. But here are some things that I do know, and I'm offering them to you with the understanding that maybe they work for you, maybe they don't. But I think when people can tell, people aren't stupid. They can figure out, this guy's a jerk. He's not being honest. He's acting like he knows it all. I don't know it all. And so saying like, look, I've been through these things and here's what I've learned and here's what I've experienced, I think makes you authentic. And if you're authentic, people are willing to at least sit up and listen to what you have to say.
Terry, is there anything else in your heart that we have not touched upon today?
Let me leave you with this. I'm an avid reader. I love to read. I think we should all be lifelong learners. And one of our greatest writers is a man by the name of Ernest Hemingway. And Hemingway wrote a book called Farewell to Arms. And in that book is a sentence, is a phrase. And I think about it. I use it on podcasts almost every day. And the sentence goes like this: life breaks everyone. And afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. I just want people to understand that life will break you. There will be some adversity in your life. Somebody close to you will die. You'll unexpectedly lose your job. You'll find out you have a chronic or a terminal illness. Life will beat you to your knees. But if you can recover from that, if you can do the things that Stephen and I have talked about on this podcast, then you will be stronger. Just like if you break your arm, they put it in a cast and it heals. Your arm is stronger at those broken places. So realize that in life. Life is going to break you. Just realize you can be stronger when you recover from that.
Wow, I love that. I got to look that verse up. Ernest Hemingway. Terry, it has been a joy talking with you today. I learned a lot. I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for saying yes.
Well, Stephen, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you as well.
Okay. Well, you've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Terry Tucker. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day.
You are not alone, just keep on.